On this episode of the Press Rewind Prince Lyrics podcast, I'll be covering a song that Prince never officially released, but allowed thousands of attendees to his controversy tour shows to hear every single night, The Second Coming. The controversy tour kicked off in Pittsburgh in late November 1981 with The Time as the opening act. After The Time performed their set, Prince would play The Second Coming over the PA system as the tour's unofficial opener. The Second Coming was actually first heard by attendees of the pre-controversy tour warm-up show at Sam's, aka First Avenue, in Minneapolis in October of 81. So attendees of that show were the first to hear The Second Coming. Then it was Pittsburgh in November of 81 as the official tour opening. The Second Coming is a brief, spirituality-focused song, and a very different sort of opener than Do It All Night was from the Dirty Mind tour that ended only 7 months prior. Prince would follow The Second Coming up typically with the song Sexuality, which is arguably the most spiritual song on the album, even though that's a bit of a stretch, considering that he says the Lord's Prayer in Controversy. Later on in the tour, Prince would switch up Sexuality with Uptown, which doesn't really have much of a spiritual bent to it. But The Second Coming never wavered as the, kind of like I said, the unofficial opening song played through the PA system. The Second Coming was recorded sometime, before the tour started at Prince's Kiowa Trail home studio. And it kind of acts as a thematic accompaniment to the more ambitious, if somewhat scattered, themes presented on the Controversy album. Sexuality was a wise choice, I think, to officially kick the show off. Like, Prince and the band are on stage performing Sexuality as opposed to The Second Coming. And mostly it's due to its lyrical focus on, new breed leaders organize. He actually says The Second Coming in the song Sexuality. The specific line in Sexuality is in the first verse. He says, "You don't need no money, you don't need no clothes, the second coming, anything goes." And so, kind of a clever way of connecting those two songs, The Second Coming being the unofficial opener, Sexuality being the official opener, like I said, for a lot of the tour, not all of it. And in the song Sexuality, the reference to a new breed leader and someone who's going to kind of, take listeners to another world, as the lyrics go, that can be interpreted as Jesus Christ, I think. In the song The Second Coming, there's definite allusions to God and Jesus Christ. It's very overt, and it's a very straightforward religious song. The song The Second Coming also shared a name with an unreleased concert concept film, which, based off of the little bit I've seen, very few clips that I've seen and what I've read through interviews with people who were involved in the making of The Second Coming, I think it was going to be more of like a Sign of the Times, 3 Chains of Gold type of film as opposed to Purple Rain or Under the Cherry Moon, which were much more narrative focused. I mean, Graffiti Bridge is kind of like in the middle. Sign of the Times and 3 Chains of Gold was mostly performances with a little bit of narrative. Purple Rain and Under the Cherry Moon had plenty of performances in them, but there was a very clear narrative plot in and written for those films. Graffiti Bridge, kind of a mixture of the two. And I think probably The Second Coming would have been more like I said, Sign of the Times film and 3 Chains of Gold. But again, this is speculation since I've never actually seen Second Coming, and but I think it's a pretty solid guess based off of, like I said, interviews with folks who were working on the movie at the time, and what the concepts were and what they shot. It was mostly going to use footage from Prince's Met Center, Bloomington, Minnesota, March of 1982 performance, and then intersperse that with vignettes of Prince and his girlfriend Susan Moonsey, and there's him and Kim Upshur. There's some footage that has leaked, and some stills that have leaked, showing the three of them. Who knows who else is in it? I mean, we can, like I said, we can speculate that the members of his band, his Controversy touring band at the time, would make an appearance. Not sure who else. Be a fascinating watch someday if it was to ever find its way out of the vault. But as of late 2022, it is not, and it is not leaked. Prince ultimately pulled the plug on the whole Second Coming film after footage was already shot and completed. I don't know, maybe he lost interest in the loose concept of a concert film with scenes tucked in between the songs, or he simply just didn't like what he saw and didn't like what was created and didn't feel like starting over from scratch. So, as Prince was often to do, once an idea starts getting fleshed out and isn't quite meeting his expectations, instead of pouring over it and spending more time and energy on it, he just kind of moves on. We've seen this time and time again, so it wouldn't be all that surprising if the Second Coming wasn't turning out exactly the way that he envisioned it, and instead of diligently working on finishing it up and rewriting and reshooting and spending more time and money, he was just like, let's just scrap it entirely, moving on to my next album, my next idea, and maybe we'll revisit it at some point, maybe we won't. And in this case, the answer is we won't. The song itself it's sung a cappella, and it speaks very bluntly and directly about God and Jesus Christ, as I kind of alluded to earlier. It's essentially a gospel song with Prince's multi-tracked vocals acting as a choir. It's quite beautiful for what it is, short, 2 minutes, give or take.
Children must learn how to love. Before the second coming.
There's not a lot of lyrics, but the lyrics that are in the song are, "It won't be long. All of God's children must learn how to love. It won't be long. I said it won't be long before the second coming. It won't be long. No, it won't be long."
How many more men must die before this gun control? You've got to love your brother if you want to save your soul.
How many more good men must die before there's gun control? You've got to love your brother if you want to free your soul. It won't be long. All of God's children must learn how to love. So those are the lyrics to The Second Coming. And I think this song, having been recorded in 1981, is interesting because of some of the themes that Prince would explore further in his career. Like this concept of talking about God and Jesus overtly in song is something that he would do shortly after the Controversy era. The 1999 album, which would come out a year later, has that section of Let's Pretend We're Married, where he talks about, I'm in love with God because he's the only way. You and I know we gotta die someday. He speaks about God in the song titled God, which was a B-side to the Purple Rain single in 1984. So there's another very clear example of Prince expressing spirituality and religion. It's more cleverly, those concepts are more cleverly coded in the Purple Rain album, but God is not coded whatsoever. Around the World in a Day, we have the latter, then we have Temptation, two very clear examples of Prince singing about his spirituality and how people need to basically get right with God before they die, get right with God before the end of times. The entire Lovesexy album, for the most part, is filled with these types of songs as well. So there's a lot of this coming up in Prince's discography over the next half a dozen years or so. And prior to the Controversy album and prior to the recording of songs like Controversy with the Lord's Prayer in it, songs like Sexuality where he references the second coming, and like I said, you could kind of interpret some of the lyrics in Sexuality to be referring to the second coming of Jesus. There really wasn't much that you could point back to and say, this is Prince speaking about God. This is a song about God. This is a song about religion. This is a song about Prince expressing his, beliefs in God. Not a whole lot. Dirty Mind was a very sexual focused song, and it wasn't so much in at least in my opinion, Sexuality bringing Prince closer to God. It was just frank and unfiltered sexuality, rude boy imagery, and Sexuality, Controversy, this album with these two songs combined with the second coming pointed in a different direction. It didn't take long for Prince to start looking towards this and then the concepts of the end of times and really feeling like I need to get right with God before the world ends or before I die. And then the end of the world is more expressed as a fear, like a concrete fear, later on the second half of the Controversy album with songs like Ronnie Talk to Russia and Anti-Christian. And then that boiled over to the following year's 1999 being a song about the apocalypse, Prince singing about the about God at the end of Let's Pretend We're Married, and it just goes on and on, like I mentioned. So you can kind of look at this song as being Prince's first real overt religious song. Controversy, the Lord's Prayer and Controversy could have been looked at as that as well. So you can make the argument either way, but Second Coming being performed on tour starting as early as October of 1981. That's the same month that the Controversy album comes out, so it's kind of like happening simultaneously. Of course, yes, if you did not attend the Controversy tour, you did not hear the Second Coming. Therefore, the song Controversy and its, the second track on the album, Sexuality, were your 1-2 punch, where you're thinking Prince is talking about something different here. He's going a different direction. Not in a different direction, like, I don't know if I can stay on board with this guy. He's too preachy. But certainly knowing that he's introducing new concepts into his music. But if you were in attendance in those shows, the Second Coming would have been that, kind of like that nudge that, oh, this dude's talking about Jesus Christ. He's talking about God. He says them right in the lyrics. All of God's children must learn how to love. And any reference to the Second Coming, you kind of have to especially if you're talking about it with the lyrics that we've been given in the song, you have to kind of interpret that to potentially mean Jesus Christ. Second coming of God in human form. And he talks about loving each other, love for one another. This is a concept, again, that would get pushed even further and more to the forefront of Prince's music in the 90s. All of God's children must learn how to love. You've got to love your brother if you want to free your soul. It won't be long. All of God's children must learn how to love. The other thing that I thought was interesting about the lyrics here is another way that this ties back to the Controversy album is the line, "How many more good men must die before there's gun control?" If you're familiar with Anti-Christian, one of the tracks on the second side of the Controversy album, you'll know that there's lyrics directly in Anti-Christian that talk about gun control. As a reminder, Anti-Christian is a song where Prince is kind of using the rip from the headlines approach, which, if you're looking at the cover of the Controversy album, there's lots of headlines, lots of, attention-grabbing headlines. So you know that this is a concept that Prince is playing with here. It comes full circle on Anti-Christian when he talks about the killing of John Lennon, the murders of black children in Atlanta. Talks about Abscam and corruption. There's the section after John Lennon and Ronald Reagan being shot. He sings about that. She killed John Lennon, shot him down cold. She tried to kill Reagan. Everybody say gun control, gun control. And that is where I think the connection is pretty clear to me when he talks about in The Second Coming about how many more good men must die before there's gun control. And so I don't think he's referencing war or terrorism per se. I personally think and what I'm interpreting this is he's talking about death on the streets, death of his brothers and sisters. Something that he would sing about again on Dance On. Dance On is from the Love Sexy album, and the lyrics, in my opinion, there's some similarities that you can hear in those two songs. On Dance On, he says, "Tell me how many young brothers must die." So that line to me sounds a bit like the line, "How many more good men must die?" There's a lot of, like I said, similarities between those two lines. One from 1981, one from 1988. I think they're both kind of still talking about violence, unnecessary death. Not that any death is necessary, but I think just kind of talking about, violence on the streets, violence on the TV. And oftentimes guns are the tool, the weapon that is used by people to kill other people when there's a conflict. And Prince is definitely in favor of gun controls as of 1981, bringing it up in this song and then again on Anti-Christian off the album proper. So he's pleading for gun control in the post-John Lennon, post-Ronald Reagan, high-profile shootings, and then combine that with just the violent imagery that he's seeing on TV, and maybe in his opinion there's, in the neighborhoods that he's familiar with and that he's seen personally, an uptick in violent deaths, violent crime, leading to deaths of people that he knew, people from around the way, or just stories that he's heard. And you kind of get the impression that this is his way of trying to say, I'm tired of it. I'm tired of reading about it. I'm tired of hearing about it. And if the second coming is happening soon, we need to get right with God, and we need to start loving one another. And essentially that is what I think the second coming, is a fascinating look into Prince's psyche around the time, and as a precursor to the themes that he would continue to write about and to speak on over the next few years. The roots go back to 1981. That's what it all boils down to. Attendees of the Controversy tour were some of the first to hear it, and first to hear where Prince was going in some of his music moving forward. So that is what I have to say about the second coming. If any of my listeners attended the Controversy tours, those shows in 1981 and 1982, I would love to hear from you. What did you think about this song in real time? the studio version of the song is not available that I could find, so all we have to hear are recordings of the song as it was played over the PA system, which is better than nothing, of course. I'll take it. But a nice cleaned up studio version. It's like I said, it's short, there's no music to it, it's acapella. But I like the sentiment, and I also like what it means in terms of Prince's direction, his lyrical direction, in an early example of him putting these concepts into word and singing a song that is not coded, is not hiding its motives. He wants us to be better people, and he wants violence to stop. So thanks for listening. This has been the Press Rewind Prince Lyrics Podcast. I've been your host, Jason Brenninger. You can find the show at pressrewind.net and on Discord, YouTube. Hit me up if you have any comments on the song, any thoughts on the song, any interpretations that you think I missed. And until next time, thank you very much and goodbye.